Have you ever wondered what a president says when the cameras are off and the microphones are put away? Okay, let's dive into this explainer and look at the real pressure test of a legendary presidency. Listen to this surprisingly candid quote from a volatile behind-closed-doors meeting in November 1962. It completely shatters that polished, idealistic image of JFK we're so used to seeing. He wasn't just a dreamer, he was a fiercely competitive pragmatist.
Welcome to our explainer on the crucible moments of John F. Kennedy. Today, we're not just going to recite a textbook biography. Nope. Instead, we're deconstructing the man by examining the intense pressure tests that forged his legacy. We'll see how a really unique blend of physical courage and highly calculated pragmatism shaped his path to the White House and his time in it.
To do this, we'll navigate through 5 key areas. We've got the making of a hero, the Pulitzer authorship debate, pell-mell for the moon, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and finally, the Camelot legacy. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The Making of a Hero, Surviving the Wreck of PT-109. This first crucible takes us to the South Pacific during World War II, where an absolute disaster of a military operation unexpectedly became the bedrock of JFK's entire political persona.
It literally took exactly 10 seconds. On the pitch-black night of August 2, 1943, Kennedy was at the helm of a patrol torpedo boat, the PT-109, creeping along to avoid detection. Well, out of nowhere, a Japanese destroyer, the Amagiri, traveling at an incredible 40 knots, rammed right into them. In just 10 seconds, the PT-109 was sliced completely in half. It threw Kennedy into the cockpit and severely injured his already chronically bad back.
And this brilliantly illustrates the agonizing endurance that was required next. Keep in mind, Kennedy was in terrible physical pain. After the collision, he and his surviving crew spent 15 exhausting hours in the water just trying to reach a tiny nearby island. By day 4, desperate for rescue, Kennedy swam out again to Nauru Island, where he famously carved a rescue message into a coconut for locals to take to a U.S. base, and it worked. That coconut directly led to their rescue on August 8th by the PT-157.
This ordeal, it spread like wildfire and built the legend of JFK. During that agonizing initial swim, they had to cover 3 miles. Kennedy's engineer, Patrick Henry McMahon, was badly burned. So Kennedy actually gave McMahon his life jacket, took the strap of that jacket in his teeth, and physically towed the man for 3 miles. It is a visceral, absolutely stunning act of heroism that earned him the Navy and Marine Corps Medal. But more than that, returning home as a decorated war hero provided the perfect launch pad for his successful 1946 run for Congress.
Section 2. The Pulitzer authorship debate, the controversy behind Profiles in Courage. Here, we shift from a battle of physical survival to one of fierce political survival. This centers on his 1956 book, Profiles in Courage, which won the Pulitzer Prize, but immediately sparked rumors that the senator hadn't actually written it himself.
The reality of Profiles in Courage is that it was a deeply collaborative effort. Kennedy's speechwriter, Ted Sorensen, did a massive amount of the heavy lifting. As Sorensen himself later acknowledged, he wrote the first drafts of most of the interior chapters and really polished that literary style. But Kennedy was the architect. He conceptualized the overarching themes, made the final editorial choices, and focused his personal writing heavily on the first and last chapters to establish the philosophical framework.
Now, what's really interesting here is how fiercely the Kennedy machine protected his intellectual image for future national ambitions. When journalist Drew Pearson claimed on national television that the book was ghostwritten, Kennedy's father threatened ABC with a $50 million lawsuit. No way they were letting that slide. The network backed down. Ted Sorensen signed an affidavit legally minimizing his role to just research assistance and was later paid a huge bonus of over $100,000. Actually, it wasn't until Sorensen's 2008 autobiography that the full extent of his drafting contributions was publicly confirmed.
Moving on to Section 3. Pell-mell for the moon, the secret pragmatism of the space race. We are now stepping into the White House Cabinet Room in November 1962. Here, a volatile meeting exposes the massive gap between Kennedy's inspiring public rhetoric about space exploration and his intensely pragmatic private motives.
You see, there was a massive clash of visions regarding space exploration. NASA Director James Webb wanted a broad program. He wanted to strive for preeminence in space through diverse technological and scientific exploration. But President Kennedy wasn't having it. To Kennedy, the lunar landing was the absolute top priority of the U.S. government, solely to beat the Soviets. So the crucial point is captured right here. Kennedy bluntly admitted that they were wrecking the budget on all these other domestic programs, and the sole justification for running at it in a pell-mell fashion was simply to prove to the world that America could pass the Soviets.
It wasn't about the romance of the stars, you know? It was a Cold War finish line.
Section 4. The Cuban Missile Crisis, 13 days on the brink of nuclear war. That fierce Cold War pragmatism leads us directly into the ultimate test of his presidency. In October 1962, U-2 reconnaissance flights discovered Soviet intermediate-range nuclear missiles actively under construction in Cuba.
Kennedy's Joint Chiefs of Staff demanded an immediate airstrike in a full invasion of Cuba. But Kennedy resisted. Instead, he opted for a naval action, carefully defining it as a quarantine. Why does that matter? Well, because choosing the word quarantine instead of blockade was a total masterstroke of legal strategy. A blockade technically assumes a legal state of war. By calling it a quarantine, the U.S. was able to secure crucial international backing from the Organization of American States.
But even with the quarantine, tensions escalated to a terrifying peak. U.S. forces were placed at DEFCON 2, the highest readiness alert ever reached. War was imminent. Amidst this, Kennedy received two conflicting messages from Soviet Premier Khrushchev, one offering a way out, and a second, much more aggressive one, demanding the U.S. remove its missiles from Turkey. So how do you untie a knot when the world is literally at the end of its rope?
You use a brilliant, two-pronged diplomatic back-channel strategy. Kennedy publicly ignored Khrushchev's second aggressive letter and officially accepted the terms of the first one. The Soviets would dismantle and remove their missiles, and the U.S. would publicly pledge not to invade Cuba. But secretly, and this is the real game changer, he sent his brother Robert Kennedy to use a back channel. They secretly agreed to the terms of the second letter, promising to quietly remove obsolete U.S. Jupiter missiles from Turkey a few months later. It allowed both sides to save face and walk back from the brink.
Finally, Section 5. The Camelot Legacy, the Myth and the Man. This final section deals with the tragic conclusion of his life and the immediate transformation of his presidency into an enduring American myth.
On November 22, 1963, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. He was just 46 years old. When he died, he was barely past his first 1,000 days in office. Because his time was so incredibly short, his legacy is historically unique. It's defined just as much by the enormous potential of what he might have done, particularly regarding civil rights and Vietnam, as by the actual legislation he passed. Following his death, it was his widow, Jacqueline Kennedy, who masterfully framed how he would be remembered. By linking his administration to the idyllic, legendary court of King Arthur, stating, "There'll be great presidents again, but there'll never be another Camelot again," she instantly cemented a mythic image. It cast this glow over his presidency that elevated him from a pragmatic politician to an almost heroic archetype in the American memory. And that leaves us here, at the end of our explainer, looking at the ultimate what-if of the 1960s. We've seen a man who survived the Pacific, carefully managed his own legend, coldly calculated the space race, and pragmatically steered the world away from nuclear fire. So considering the resilient, brilliant, and deeply pragmatic leader we've just unpacked, how do you think the course of history would have shifted had John F. Kennedy's first 1,000 days not been cut short? Think on that. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.